My niece walked into my son's room and accidentally took his $1,800 electric scooter. My brother said she wanted it. My dad added, "Your pathetic boy deserves nothing. Let him walk like the nobody he is." I took my son and left. At 6 a.m., my niece called me screaming, while a locksmith changed their front door code and refused to let my brother inside. Cole set the scooter against his bedroom wall every night before bed. Same spot, same angle, left side of the door so it would not scratch the paint. He had saved for 7 months to put toward it, mowing 3 neighbors' lawns every Saturday morning, keeping a running total in a spiral notebook he left open on his desk. The columns were neat. Date, address, amount. He added the numbers himself and circled the total at the bottom of every page. I covered the difference. $1,800 for a kid who earned every dollar he contributed and never once complained about the ones he did not have. He rode it after school, always with a helmet, always the same route, down our driveway, left on Birch, 2 loops around the cul-de-sac, and back. 20 minutes, every day, rain or shine. The neighbors knew the sound of the motor winding down as he coasted the last 30 feet into the garage. Mrs. Halsey on the corner would wave from her driveway. Cole would nod, not wave back, because both hands stayed on the handlebars. That was Cole, 11 years old, and already more responsible with his belongings than most adults I have rented to. He washed the deck plate with a damp rag once a week and kept the charging cable wound in a coil on his desk next to the notebook. Careful with things he earned. Careful with everything, really, because nobody had ever handed him anything for free. And he knew it. The day it disappeared, he did not cry. He walked into the kitchen where I was rinsing dishes and said, "Dad, it's gone." I manage 4 residential rental properties on the southeast end of town. 11 years in the business. I bought my first unit at a county auction for $41,000, gutted the kitchen myself, and had a tenant in 90 days. 3 more units over the next decade, each bought with the rent from the one before. When you manage rental properties long enough, you learn the difference between someone who borrows and someone who takes. My brother Ford is 41. He runs a small landscaping crew, 3 guys and a used pickup, mostly residential. He is loud where I am quiet and fast where I am careful, and our father Grant has always treated those qualities as proof that Ford got the right version of our last name. 2 years and 2 months before the barbecue, Ford called me at 9 on a Tuesday night. His lease was up, his credit was short, and Nadia was 5 months pregnant with their second. I had a vacant 2-bedroom on Sycamore Street, freshly painted new kitchen flooring I had installed myself. I gave Ford the door code and told him to move in whenever he was ready. No lease, no deposit, no monthly payment, just family. 26 months later, I had collected exactly $0 in rent from that unit. The fair market rate was $1,000 a month. That is $26,000 I chose not to charge. In addition, I had referred Ford's landscaping crew to every landlord in my property management network, 6 owners in total, and those referrals brought Ford approximately $2,400 a month in steady contract work, mowing, trimming, mulch runs, seasonal cleanups, work he would not have had without my phone call. And in 26 months, nobody in that family said thank you. Not when I replaced the water heater on my own dime. Not when Ford called me on a Saturday morning about the garbage disposal and said, "Isn't that the landlord's job?" While looking at me, the landlord, without blinking. He treated that house the way he treated everything I provided, as if it had always been there, like weather. The barbecue was at Grant's house on a Sunday in late May. Warm enough that the kids ran through the backyard sprinkler and the grill smoke drifted low and flat across the lawn. Ford and Nadia brought Piper, who was 9 and had the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Grant stood at the grill with a spatula in one hand and a beer in the other, 67 years old, retired from the electric company, still convinced that the volume of his voice was the same thing as being right. 2 of my cousins were there, Trina and Jerome, sitting at the far table with plates of coleslaw and not talking to each other. Cole and I arrived around 1. He brought his soccer ball. He left the scooter at home, in his room, against the wall. But I had put it in the trunk that morning because he wanted to ride at the park after the barbecue. I told him we would stop on the way home. Piper asked Cole to come inside and look at something. She had never shown interest in Cole before. He watched her for a second, the way he watches everyone, reading the situation before committing, and then he went. 20 minutes later, he came back through the screen door and stood next to my lawn chair. "Dad, it's gone." "What's gone?" "My scooter. It was in the trunk." Piper took it out to the driveway. I walked around the side of the house. Piper was riding the scooter in slow circles on the driveway, her feet barely reaching the deck, the handlebars wobbling because the machine was built for a rider twice her weight. Ford was leaning against the chain-link fence 6 feet away, arms crossed, a paper plate balanced on the post beside him. He watched her ride the way you watch a cartoon on Sunday morning. He saw me coming and looked up. "Ford, that's Cole's scooter. He needs to give it back." Ford squinted at me like I had said something confusing. "She's riding it. Read, relax. It costs $1,800. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. She's 9. She saw it in the trunk and thought it was cool." "What do you want me to do, tackle her?" "I want you to tell her to get off it and give it back to Cole." Ford picked up his paper plate and took a bite of the burger. He chewed slowly, looking at Piper, then back at me. "She wanted it," he said, still chewing. "Kids share. That's how it works." 2 words buried inside a sentence about sharing. No apology. No plan to return it. Ford turned back toward the grill and called Piper to come eat. He left the scooter leaning against the fence like it had always been there. I walked inside to find Cole. Grant was standing in the kitchen doorway with a beer in his right hand and his left hand flat on the counter. He had heard the whole exchange through the open window. "You're not going to make a scene over a toy, are you?" Grant said. "It's not a toy. It cost $1,800. Cole saved for 7 months. Grant shook his head. "That's the problem right there. You spend $1,800 on a scooter for an 11-year-old and then act surprised when someone else wants to use it. You're raising that boy to think he's better than everyone." Before I could respond, Grant stepped forward and raised his voice, loud enough for Trina at the table, Jerome by the window, and Nadia at the counter to hear every syllable. "Your pathetic boy has been handed everything his whole life, and he still can't keep a smile on his face. Piper wanted it. She's a child. She doesn't understand ownership. Your son needs to learn that in this family we share. Or maybe he's too good for that now, just like his father. Let him walk like the nobody he is. He'll thank us when he grows up and figures out the world doesn't owe him a scooter." Cole was standing 3 feet behind me. He heard every word. His face stayed flat, but his left hand, the one with the blue tournament wristband from his first soccer win 8 months ago, the silicone band he never takes off, curled into a fist and then uncurled. Nadia was slicing tomatoes at the counter. She did not look up. Trina set her plastic cup down and stared at the floor. Jerome stopped chewing and placed his fork across the edge of his plate. Cole looked at me and said, very quietly, "Can we go home?" I picked up our bag from the hallway chair. I took Cole's hand. I walked past Grant without a word, past Nadia, past the cousins who had watched it happen and said nothing, through the front door, across the lawn, down the driveway, and into the car. I buckled my seatbelt and pulled out of Grant Street before I trusted myself to speak. Cole buckled his own belt and did not say a word for 12 minutes. I counted every one of them. I counted because if I did not focus on a number, I was going to turn the car around and say things in front of my son that an 11-year-old should never hear his father say. If you have ever driven in silence next to your kid after someone told him he was nothing, after his own grandfather called him pathetic in a room full of family who did not open their mouths, you know the weight in that car. You know the sound of a child rearranging what he thought was true about the people who are supposed to love him. If you have been in that car, welcome back to Family Secret Tales. Subscribe if this is your first time, and stay with this one. It gets worse before it gets better, but it gets better. I almost turned around at the gas station on Route 4. Cole had fallen asleep by then, his head against the window, his left arm resting across his lap. The tournament wristband caught the overhead fluorescent, and I sat there with the engine running, replaying Grant's voice. Let him walk like the nobody he is. I thought about going back and saying the things I had swallowed. Then I looked at Cole's face in the passenger seat, calm in a way that only sleep allows, and I realized that if I went back, I would be doing it for me. Cole had already answered, "Can we go home?" That was his decision, and it was cleaner than anything I had planned. At home, I carried Cole inside and set him on his bed. He woke up halfway, pulled the blanket over his shoulders, and turned toward the wall. The wristband was still on his wrist. The spiral notebook was still open on his desk, the last entry from 2 Saturdays ago, Mrs. Halsey, front and back, $35. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the empty space where the scooter should have been. The faint scuff mark on the baseboard where the front wheel rested every night. Then I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened the tracking app on my phone. When I bought the scooter 5 months earlier, I had clipped a GPS tracker to the underside of the frame, a $30 device linked to an app that pings the location every 15 minutes. Standard theft protection. I set it up the same afternoon Cole wrote it for the first time, the way I install lockbox trackers on every rental unit I manage. Habit, caution, the blue dot was at Ford's address. More specifically, it was at my address. The unit on Sycamore Street. The property I owned. The property Ford occupied without a lease, without a payment, without a single document that proved he had any legal right to be inside those walls. My son's scooter was sitting inside a house that only existed in Ford's life because I had let it. I pulled up the property file on my laptop. 4 units, each with a folder. The Sycamore folder was the thinnest one in the stack. No lease agreement, no rental application, no security deposit receipt, no bank record of a single incoming payment. 26 months of occupancy, and the only documentation I had was a text message from Ford that said, "Moved in Tuesday. Thanks, bro." That was the entire legal relationship between my brother and my building. I had already been speaking with my attorney, Helen Correa, for 3 weeks before any of this happened. She had reviewed the Sycamore file and confirmed what I already knew. Ford had no documented tenancy, no lease, no rent payments. In our state, that meant Ford was a guest, not a tenant, and I could ask him to leave at any time with a written notice as a formality. The reason I had called Helen was a plan I had been sitting with for over a year. I wanted to put the Sycamore property into a trust for Cole, his college fund. The property generated $67,000 a year in potential rental income, and the equity alone would cover 4 years of state tuition. Helen had drawn up the trust paperwork. I had not signed it because I was waiting for the right time to tell Ford he needed to move. I kept delaying because Ford was family. 3 weeks before the barbecue, I called Grant about something unrelated, a plumber recommendation for a bathroom valve replacement at one of my other units. During the conversation, I mentioned, almost casually, that I was thinking about putting the Sycamore property into a trust for Cole. I said it the way I say most things, plainly, without emphasis, as if it were one item on a list. Grant went quiet for a beat too long. Then he said, "That seems like a big step." He changed the subject to the plumber, and the call ended 3 minutes later. I did not think about that pause again until the night of the barbecue, sitting alone in my kitchen at 11 o'clock, staring at the GPS dot on my phone screen and replaying Grant's voice from earlier that afternoon. Grant knew. He had known for 3 weeks that I was considering moving Ford out, and he said nothing to me, nothing to Ford, nothing to anyone. He waited. And when the barbecue came, he delivered that line about Cole in front of 6 people as if it had been written on an index card. The cruelty was not spontaneous. It was strategic. It was supposed to send a message: do not touch your brother's arrangement. I called the locksmith at 7 that evening, the same company I used for all 4 of my units, the same technician who had rekeyed my Route 12 property twice in the past year. He arrived at 9, parked his white van under the streetlight on Sycamore, and changed the electronic entry code on both access points. front door and side door. I sat in my car across the street with the window cracked, listening to the faint beeping of the keypad as the new code was programmed. The whole job took 22 minutes. $340 charged to my property maintenance account. The street was quiet. Ford's truck was gone. He was still at Grant's, probably on the couch, probably telling himself this was a misunderstanding. Wherever Piper was sleeping that night, it was somewhere warm, and the guilt for it being somewhere other than this house belonged to the man who called my son a nobody, not to me. I drove home. I told Cole the scooter would be back before the end of the week. He looked at me from his bed and nodded. He did not ask how. He trusted me enough to stop there. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. Piper, calling from Nadia's phone. She was crying so hard, I caught every third word. We can't get in. And, Daddy's outside. And, it's cold. And, why won't the door open? I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I said, tell your dad to call me. Ford called at 6:14. I let it ring. 6:21, 6:38, 6:52. 4 voicemails. The first, read, what the hell did you do to the door? The code's not working, call me back. The second, this isn't funny, read. My daughter is standing outside in her pajamas. Whatever this is, fix it. The third, look, whatever happened yesterday, we can talk about it. Just give me the code, man. Come on. The fourth was just breathing. Then Grant's voice in the background, he'll come around. He always does. Then a hang-up. If you have ever had someone call you 4 times from a lawn they do not own, asking for a code to a door they never paid for, and you let every call go to voicemail while you finished your coffee, you already understand this story. If you are still here, thank you. This is Family Secret Tales, and the part that changes everything is next. Delia works in property management at a firm downtown. She is the only person outside my family who has met Cole more than twice. 6 months earlier, I was running late to Cole's school open house night. Delia went ahead and saved me a seat. When I arrived, she was sitting next to Cole in the cafeteria while he showed her photos of the scooter on his phone, scrolling through every angle, explaining the specs like a kid reciting baseball cards, telling her the exact price, $1,800, as if the number itself was part of the accomplishment. Delia looked at me over Cole's head and mouthed 4 words, that kid is going to be fine. That morning, sitting on my couch, she brought 2 coffees from the drive-thru and said nothing for 10 minutes. Then she asked what happened. I told her everything. The barbecue. Ford at the fence. Grant's line. Cole going quiet in the car. The GP's tracker. The locksmith. The 4 voicemails. She listened without interrupting, the way she listens to everything, with her hands wrapped around the cup and her eyes steady. When I finished, she set her cup on the coffee table and said, how long ago did you tell Grant about the trust? 3 weeks. Maybe 22 days. And before that, had Ford ever taken anything from Cole? No, never. Delia leaned forward. You told Grant you were putting the property in a trust for Cole. 3 weeks later, out of nowhere, Piper walks into the trunk of your car and rides off on an $1,800 scooter, and Ford watches it happen like it's nothing. She set her cup down. Reed, that wasn't random. Ford knew. Grant told him. And they tested you to see if you would back down. You think Ford let her take it on purpose? I think your brother has been testing you since the day he moved in. He never signed a lease because he thought he'd never have to. I sat with that for a full 30 seconds. The coffee went cold in my hand. I had been treating the scooter as the trigger. Delia was telling me it was the probe. The scooter was the final test in a series that had been running for 26 months. Ford had not let Piper take the scooter because she wanted it. He had let her take it and said nothing because he wanted to see what I would do. And Grant had delivered the brutal line about Cole, not because he believed it, but because he wanted to make sure I was too ashamed to act on the trust plan I had mentioned 3 weeks earlier. Grant's line at the barbecue was not anger. It was a warning. He was telling me, in front of witnesses, that Cole was not worth protecting and that Ford's comfort mattered more. Ford had been testing me for 26 months, pushing the line a little further each season, checking whether my goodwill had a bottom. He never signed a lease because he believed he would never need one. He thought being family was a permanent arrangement that I would never audit. The scooter was the final question. My answer was the code change at 9 o'clock. I almost called Ford that afternoon. The GP's dot still showed the scooter at the Sycamore property, sitting in the garage where Piper had left it, and part of me considered driving over and ending this with a handshake and one more chance. Then I replayed that fourth voicemail. The breathing. And Grant in the background, he'll come around. He always does. Those 5 words closed the door. Grant believed my goodwill was structural, built into the foundation, impossible to remove. He was wrong. Delia drove to Sycamore that afternoon to pick up the scooter. Ford opened the door using the temporary code I had provided through Helen that morning. A 72-hour window strictly for the purpose of retrieving personal belongings. Delia knocked, and when Ford answered, she said 5 words. Reed asked me to pick up Cole's scooter. Ford looked at her for a beat, then went inside and came back carrying the scooter by the handlebars. No argument, no apology. No acknowledgement that the machine in his hands represented 7 months of an 11-year-old Saturday mornings. He handed it over the way you return a library book you kept past the due date, like the inconvenience of the whole thing was somehow Delia's. She loaded it in her trunk and brought it to my house. Cole was at school. I carried the scooter inside and leaned it against his bedroom wall, same spot, same angle, left side of the door so it would not scratch the paint. When Cole came home that afternoon, he walked into his room, stopped in the doorway, and looked at the scooter for a long time. He set his backpack down, walked over, and ran his hand along the deck plate the way a mechanic checks an engine after a long trip. Is it okay? I asked from the hallway. Yeah, he checked the handlebars, the brake lever, the charging port. It's fine. Everything's fine. Then he looked at me and said, Thanks, Dad. 2 words. Worth more than anything Grant has said to me in 10 years. The next morning, I drove to the Sycamore property at 8:30. Ford was on the front lawn in the same clothes he had been wearing since the lockout, unshaven, arms hanging at his sides. Grant stood next to him with his arms crossed and his chin lifted, the posture of a man who had decided before the conversation started that he was the wrong party. Delia parked her car across the street and stayed inside with the window down. Mr. Akabe, the neighbor in the adjacent unit, was on his front porch watering his hanging ferns. He set the can down when I got out of the car. I walked up the sidewalk and stopped at the bottom step of the porch. Ford, whose name is on the deed to this property? He blinked twice. What? The deed. Filed with the county. Whose name? Yours, but Reed, come on, we had a deal. We had nothing. No lease, no written agreement, no payment schedule. What about last month? How much rent did you pay last month, Ford? His jaw shifted. He looked at Grant. Grant uncrossed his arms and said, Now hold on a minute. I did not look at Grant. I looked at Ford. How much? We agreed I'd pay when I could. You never could. Not once. 26 months, Ford. $0. Grant stepped forward. Reed, you are making this bigger than it needs to be. Your brother needed help. I turned to face him for the first time. And my son? What did he need? Tell me, Dad, what did Cole need when you called him a pathetic nobody 3 feet from his face? Grant's mouth opened and closed. Behind me, Mr. Achabe's watering can was on the porch railing. He was standing still with his hands at his sides. I turned back to Ford. How many times did you call me yesterday morning? Ford swallowed. 4, and how many of those calls did I answer? None. Why do you think that was? Reed, can we just talk about this inside like adults? Inside what? Inside my building? The one you lived in for 26 months without paying a single dollar of rent? The one where you changed nothing, fixed nothing, maintained nothing, And then told your daughter she could take my son's property because she wanted it? Ford's hand found the porch railing. His knuckles went white around the wood. His weight shifted backward away from the steps, and his eyes moved to Grant and then came back to me. Grant was looking at the sidewalk. Misters Achebe had not moved. No help was coming from any direction, and Ford could see it written across the morning like a headline. What is the word for when someone takes something that does not belong to them, Ford? Just the word. He did not answer. I stepped onto the porch. 26 months. $0. $26,000 in fair market rent I gave you because you are my brother. I referred your landscaping crew to 6 landlords in my property network. Every one of them. $2,400 a month in contracts you got because I picked up the phone and said your name. You took my son's scooter. You watched your daughter ride it and said she wanted it like that, settled anything. You took $26,000 of free housing and called it family. Ford's face tightened. I was going to pay you back. I told you that. When? In which of the 26 months were you going to start? When the business picked up. You know how landscaping works, Reed. It's seasonal. Your business had 4 contracts a month from my referrals alone. You had income. You chose not to pay because you thought you would never have to. Ford looked at the ground. Grant shifted his weight on the sidewalk and said, Reed, that's enough. He's your brother. I turned to Grant. And Cole is your grandson. You called an 11-year-old boy a nobody in front of 6 people. You said he should walk. You said he was pathetic. Cole saves every dollar he earns. He mows 3 lawns every Saturday morning and writes the amount in a notebook on his desk. He wore his tournament wristband the day you humiliated him, and he did not cry. He looked at me and asked if we could go home. That is the boy you called pathetic, and this is the house you are standing outside of. Grant's chin dropped. His arms uncrossed and hung at his sides. He opened his mouth to speak and then closed it again. Nadia appeared in the doorway behind the glass pane. She could hear every word but could not come outside. Ford had entered through the temporary code that morning and had not shared it with her. She stood with both palms flat against the glass, watching. You remember what you said, Dad? You said he'd thank us when he grew up. He's 11. He watched his grandfather call him a nobody in front of the entire family, and he didn't even cry. He asked me if we could go home. That's the kid you discarded, and that's the house you're locked out of. I stepped back. I am done being the floor this family stands on. No more free rent, no more referrals, no more conversations where I pretend that any of you understand what it costs to carry everything and get called a nobody for it. This is the last dollar, the last favor, the last time I pick up this phone. Ford's jaw tightened. His hand had not left the railing. His voice dropped low, almost reasonable, as if a different tone could undo 26 months. Reed. Come on. Tell me what you want. I will Venmo you the $1,800 right now. That's what the scooter cost, right? $1,800. I'll send it before you get in the car. Just give me the code and we call this even. Even, I said. $26,000 in rent you never paid. $2,400 a month in landscaping contracts you got because of my phone calls. A water heater I replaced on my dime. A disposal I fixed on a Saturday morning while you watched from the couch. And you want to settle all of that for $1,800. It's a start, Ford said. It's something. It's 26 months too late. I pulled out my phone. I did not open Venmo. I opened my messages and sent one attachment to Ford's number, the formal notice to vacate, filed that morning at the county clerk's office. Helen Correa's letterhead. 30-day notice. My name is property owner. Ford's name listed as occupant, not tenant. Ford's phone buzzed in his hand. He read the screen. 3 expressions crossed his face in 2 seconds, and then nothing at all. His hand slid off the railing. You said she wanted it, I said. I wanted this property back. Turns out, wanting something doesn't make it yours. I walked down the steps. Mr. Achebe was still standing on his porch. Delia was leaning against her car door across the street. Grant followed me to the sidewalk and stopped at the curb, mouth working like he was rehearsing something. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Grant in the passenger side window for a full second, maybe two. He was looking at his own reflection in the glass, standing on a sidewalk in front of a building he had treated as his son's permanent gift. He was still standing there when I turned the corner. I almost pulled over a block away and gone back to tell Grant the full truth. The trust. Cole's future. The college fund I had been building quietly for a year, while Ford slept in my unit for free and Grant called my son a nagdadio, a nobody at a barbecue. I wanted Grant to know how close Ford had been to something real and how thoroughly he destroyed it over an $1,800 scooter in a sentence that took 4 seconds to say. But Cole was at school. The morning was already long, and the truth about what Grant lost would reach him on its own. It always reaches men who refuse to listen until the floor is gone beneath them. Ford's landscaping business started losing work within 2 weeks. I made no calls, I sent no warnings, I stopped recommending his crew, and that was enough. When a landlord in my network texted me asking if Ford was available for a spring lot cleanup, I wrote back 4 words, I'm no longer recommending him. That landlord mentioned it to the next one. By the end of the second week, Ford had lost roughly $2,400 a month in steady contract work from 6 different property owners, every one of them someone I had introduced him to. One of them, a landlord named Pete who owns 8 units on the north side, called Ford directly to cancel a standing monthly contract. Ford asked what had changed. Pete said, going a different direction this season. Ford pushed harder, Pete. I've been doing your lots for 2 years. What happened? Pete paused and said, talk to your brother, Ford. Then he hung up. Another landlord, a woman who managed a strip of townhomes near the elementary school, sent Ford a text. Hi, Ford. We've decided to go with another crew for the rest of the season. Thanks for your work. No explanation, no argument, no opening for negotiation. Ford replied asking what he had done wrong. She did not respond. The property manager group chat where I post 2 or 3 times a week never mentioned Ford by name. I did not tell a single person what had happened at the barbecue or what Grant had said to Cole. 3 colleagues texted me privately over the following days. Each one asked a version of the same question. Is Ford still someone you vouch for? I gave each of them the same answer. I am no longer recommending his services. That was enough. Ford moved out on day 37, the final day of the 30-day window. He loaded a rented trailer in light rain. His 3-man crew helping him carry furniture that was mostly secondhand to begin with. The landscaping truck sat on the street with the tailgate down, a push mower, and 2 blowers getting wet in the bed. Nobody covered them. Grant stood on the sidewalk holding an umbrella over himself, watching Ford drag a dresser across the wet concrete. They drove to a motel on Route 9, $110 a week, 2 beds, a mini fridge, and a parking lot that smells like diesel. Grant moved in with Ford because there was nowhere else, and because Ford could not afford the weekly rate alone. Nadia packed 2 suitcases and drove Piper to her mother's house an hour south. She did not call me. She did not call Ford for 3 days. The Sycamore unit was empty by Thursday evening. I walked through it the next morning with a clipboard. 2 fist-sized holes in the hallway drywall, a cracked latch on the bedroom window, a grease stain on the kitchen ceiling deep enough to need repainting. I photographed everything and added the repair estimate to the file. There was no deposit to deduct from and no forwarding address to send the bill to. I listed the property the following Monday. $1,200 a month, first month plus last month plus security deposit. 4 inquiries came in by Thursday. The first applicant was a couple with a 2-year-old, a credit score above 700, and verifiable employment going back 4 years. I ran the background check, confirmed the references, and signed the lease the next week. The deposit in first month totaled $4,800 in a single transaction. More money in one deposit than Ford had contributed in 26 months of living there. The for rent sign was in the yard for 9 days. On the morning I pulled it out of the ground, Grant's car was parked across the street. He had driven from the motel 20 minutes each way. And he was sitting behind the wheel, watching me hammer the post loose from the lawn. I saw him in the driver's seat, both hands on the steering wheel, engine running. He did not get out. He did not roll the window down. He sat there for maybe 2 minutes while I loaded the sign into my trunk, and when I looked back, he was staring straight ahead, past the windshield, past the property, past anything I could see from where I was standing. Then he put the car in gear and pulled away without waving. "Mister," a cabbie waved from his porch. He said nothing about what had happened. His watering can was in his hand, the same one he had set down the morning I asked Ford questions he could not answer. Neither of us needed to say anything about it. Grant sent me a text 14 days after the confrontation. I was sitting on the front step of my house. Cole was riding his scooter, same model, same color, purchased with money from the first month's rent the new tenant paid, in one slow circle on the driveway. The tournament wristband was on his wrist where it always is, the blue faded lighter now from 8 months of wear. The edges soft from shower water and playground dirt, and all the things an 11-year-old puts his hands through in a day. Grant's text was 4 sentences. I will not repeat them here, because they do not change anything. The tone sat somewhere between apology and accusation, the kind of message a man writes when he wants to take something back, without admitting he meant it in the first place. I read every word. Then I set the phone face down on the concrete step and watched Cole ride to the mailbox, turn and coast back toward me with both hands on the handlebars. He stopped the scooter 3 feet from the step and looked at me. "Dad, can I do one more loop?" "Yeah, go ahead." He pushed off and rolled down the driveway again, slow and steady, the way he does everything he cares about. The wristband shifted on his wrist as he steered. Blue silicone, faded now, the edges soft. 8 months of wear, and he had never once asked for a new one. The Sycamore property had a tenant who signed a 12-month lease, paid a $4,800 deposit, and knew the front door code because she earned the right to have it. Ford was in a motel room on Route 9, splitting the weekly rate with our father, whose last words to my son were that he deserved to walk like a nobody. Nadia and Piper were at Nadia's mother's house, and the landscaping truck was parked in the motel lot with a push mower rusting in the bed because Ford had not landed a new contract since the referrals went silent. Cole did not know about the trust yet. He did not know the Sycamore rental income would fund 4 years of tuition. He did not know that the property his uncle had treated like a free apartment was the foundation of his future. He just knew his scooter was back against the bedroom wall every night, and that his dad had come to get him when it mattered. If you stayed until the end, you already know why I told this story. Not for sympathy. Because somewhere out there, someone is letting their brother live rent-free in a building they own, and their father is calling their kid a nobody at a Sunday barbecue, and they are still answering the phone. If that is you, change the code. You own the building. Thank you for watching Family Secret Tales. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.